Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Woodland. I'm an author. I've taught a lot of classes and workshops, but enough about me. I want to get straight to the message tonight. I want to talk about becoming a spiritual activist, alternately titled, What to Do When the World is Falling Apart. So what do I mean by a spiritual activist? As I'm defining it here, a spiritual activist is someone who is using all of their faculties and resources to create better realities for their lives and our world. Being a spiritual activist is about embracing the power we each have to change the world. And it includes being awake, being informed and politically involved. It also means recognizing that a part of changing the world requires that we also change ourselves. We can't create the best possible world unless we're also dedicated to becoming the best possible human. Spiritual activism really is something of an antidote to our times. These times, there's no doubt we live in really chaotic times. But sometimes chaos can be just the thing to spur evolution. How many times in the last couple of years have you heard the word unprecedented? It comes up just about every day to describe our politics, environmental crises, the latest mass shooting, and all kinds of other world developments. There's so many things happening that are unprecedented that it's truly hard to track it all. We're living in really extreme times. And personally, I believe we've reached the breakdown or breakthrough point for humanity, where the extremes of everything that's breaking down, they're coexisting right alongside some real quantum leaps forward into a new evolutionary phase. And yes, I do believe we're evolving. The human race is evolving. But still, the world we live in has gotten really stressful. The pace of life just keeps getting faster. Economic disparities between the rich and poor keep getting bigger. Environmental disasters keep getting scarier. And let's not even get started on politics and ideological divides. It's crazy out there. Modern life can be really hard. And these last couple of years particularly have just been a real kick in the gut for many of us. I see a lot of people taking on the pain of the world and melting down, really kind of breaking down under the weight of it all. Even the most socially active and or spiritually aware and or optimistic of us can feel really powerless in the midst of today's world. And that's why I want to talk to you all today. I believe that these times are like no others. And I do believe that we're in the midst of a significant evolutionary leap. And at the same time, I think we're more on the brink of self-induced extinction than ever before. It's truly is breakdown or breakthrough time. A quote I reference a lot is by Bruce Lipton. And Bruce Lipton is well known for breaking some new ground as a developmental biologist, making the case that genes and DNA can actually be manipulated by belief. He wrote a book on this called Biology of Belief. Fabulous book. Now, in a later book of his called Spontaneous Evolution, he writes, and here's the quote. I love this quote. He writes, "Crisis ignites evolution. The challenges and crises we face today are actually signs that spontaneous change is imminent. We're about to face our evolution," end quote. This is a go-to quote for me that I refer to often because I think it perfectly sums up where we are today. In my own most recent book, titled The Breakthrough Point, I identified many signs of a world coming together, not just falling apart. We tend to hear all about the unprecedented, awful, falling apart stuff. We don't hear so much about the ways we're coming together. And I'm not talking about some far off future utopian fantasy or something happening in the metaphysical realms that only the most sensitive can perceive. I'm a spiritual teacher, and I hear a lot of spiritual teachers talking like that about changes in the etheric realms. And I don't dismiss that, but personally, I'm pretty pragmatic. If I can't see something manifesting in pretty tangible ways, I'm just not all in. What I'm talking about here are strong global trends that have made their way into major areas of science, business, technology, culture, and are bringing the world together. Now, this is a lot to unpack in one short talk, but I'll take a stab at it. I'll, scratch the surface at least. I go into a lot more detail on this in my book. But essentially, this new trend has to do with a new operating model that's gaining momentum all around us and is evolving us at a rapid clip. And it's not anything mysterious or esoteric. In fact, when I spell it out, you'll recognize it immediately, and it's probably become so ordinary that you take it for granted. So think about a few terms that have entered our vocabulary since the turn of the 21st century, like crowdsourcing, open sourcing, circular economy, sharing economy, collaborative consumption. All of these refer to the sharing and disseminating of goods and services and information in decentralized, peer-to-peer fashions enabled by the internet, and without any involvement of a central authority. They require and encourage mass participation to drive them. They encourage the most efficient use of resources, and they minimize inequities of power and of resources while they simultaneously empower individuals. They're all about from the ground up empowerment, where we all benefit from joining together, as opposed to old order, hierarchical, from the top down forms of power. And this is the emerging new order. It's the new operating model. It's one where individuals are empowered and enriched beyond anything we've previously known through small efforts contributed by masses of us into an organizing infrastructure. And the process of this is win-win. It's easy. It's the virtually limitless power of all of us together sharing rather than taking. And it lacks the linear structure inherent in hierarchies. Now, if this still sounds kind of vague and hypothetical, some examples of this model include such ubiquitous things as Google and Wikipedia and many other online platforms that connect people in new and unprecedented ways. And sure, there's a dark side to these too. We all have some very good reasons why we love to hate the internet and all that it spawned. And I get it. There's even a new trend in schools now, in some schools, to ban all screens. And I don't think that's a bad idea. But at the same time, the internet has given rise to a multitude of platforms where we come together in massive numbers and share rather than take. Through masses of small contributions, huge resources can become available to everyone. Just think about Wikipedia, for example. Wikipedia, it's only an infrastructure. It would be nothing at all without the small contributions of many, many unpaid contributors who basically contribute for the sake of contributing rather than for payment or recognition. And even an infrastructure as well known and widespread as Wikipedia doesn't produce superstars among its tens of thousands of contributors. And, the organizing infrastructure just of search engines has enabled the emergence of all kinds of sharing economies, some of which have radically changed many industries. I mean, think of music, publishing, media. As the public increasingly has direct access to a wide range of artists, bloggers, low-cost or free online resources, it's really different. And even if you haven't personally noticed, there's all kinds of sharing going on all around us all the time. I know for myself, when I first moved into my urban Minneapolis neighborhood about a dozen years ago, neighbors rarely reached out to each other. I didn't know my neighbors. And now there's this very vibrant, active sharing among neighbors of free or low-cost goods and services and news and help of all kinds and events and ideas, all through the social media platform Nextdoor.com, which is nationwide, it's becoming worldwide. It's basically a network connecting neighbors. I mean, it's really kind of adorable. Every time a pet goes missing, there's, Sparky the dog, like on on Nextdoor, and then there'll be a dozen replies like, "Oh, I saw him near Grand and 26th." I mean, it's just amazing to me what a different feeling in my neighborhood is created by this particular network. And then you think of information. Every time the smallest question runs through my mind, I take out my phone and Google it. I have answers in seconds that a couple of decades ago would have taken days of research if I could find them at all. And these are just a couple of really small, mundane examples of a model that's being implemented all over the place in many, many different areas. And they all show ways that individuals are being empowered as never before, again, by masses of people making small contributions into an organizing infrastructure. And there's many, many of these I could name. I could go on for a few hours, just talk on this. And they all have ripple effects, very vast ripple effects. And these are things we've never had before. They're unprecedented. It's the power of getting more for less by sharing together rather than simply taking for oneself. And I see this new operating model as being integrally tied to humanity's evolution into what I think of as unity consciousness. Now, I also believe that 2016 was a particularly pivotal year in this shift. And in my book, I go into depth about why 2016 was so significant and why I think it was very pivotal. But that's too long of a story to go into here. But 2016, in that I believe it is so tied to an evolutionary shift, I think that explains something about why the last election cycle and everything since has been so incredibly extreme. The evolutionary energy of coming together in masses for the good of all, I think is why Bernie Sanders was able to run such a successful campaign with very little media coverage, no super PAC money, something that really was unheard of before he did it. But that's shifted now. Now there's a growing movement of Democratic politicians who are all refusing super PAC money. And Bernie Sanders, he'd been preaching the same egalitarian message for decades. And for decades, there weren't that many people listening. But in 2016, his message, I think, was so in alignment with the evolutionary direction of our times that it propelled him further than many thought he could go. And Hillary Clinton moved more into alignment with this model as well in the course of her campaign. You remember she changed her slogan from "I'm with her" to "Stronger Together." Now, with a strong evolutionary shift in process, I think it was inevitable that in 2016, politics as usual just got propelled into the realm of the unprecedented. From Sanders' surprising rise with no super PAC backing, to Clinton nearly becoming the first woman president, to Donald Trump defying all the rules and norms of politics, what unfolded seemed to take on mythic proportions. And regardless of what side you were on, the players became our superheroes and uber villains. And what we're seeing now are the forces of evolution leading us toward an inclusive, egalitarian future, locked in this titanic clash with the hierarchical powers of old that rule by fear, promising to keep us safe from the dreaded other. So remember that Bruce Lipton quote I started with. It goes like this, if you've already forgotten. Crisis ignites evolution. The challenges and crises we face today are actually signs that spontaneous change is imminent. We are about to face our evolution, end quote. I believe Donald Trump is the crisis that's igniting our evolution. I see the very chaos of our times as both a sign of our evolution and a catalyst for it. And so, how exactly is Trump pushing us toward unity consciousness? Well, recall as soon as Trump was elected, grassroots activism just took off in unprecedented ways. And starting with Women's March, it's been largely driven by women. And it's not just that the Democratic Party is getting stronger. It's really more a matter of the Democratic Party being morphed into something new as a result of local groups of people coming together in massive grassroots ways, very much in keeping with the new operating model of ground-up power, and repopulating local races with unprecedented numbers of women and people of color and LGBTQ people and overall younger candidates who are not career politicians, who are just enthusiastic change makers. So, in other words, instead of a party directing the people in this case are taking over a party. And so if you've ever hung back from politics, if you've tended to think all politicians are the same, that it doesn't really matter, that's all changed in the last 2 years. These times are different. These times really are like no other. Change can happen now in ways that it never could before. That said, with all this talk of humanity evolving, does that mean I'm a cheery optimist who believes everything is going to work out just fine for us all? Well, no. I actually think we're on the brink where anything can happen next, be it spiraling into extinction or rising up into a new order of well-being. Environmental reports keep on getting more and more dire. And even if we don't blow ourselves up or die of some new world plague, we just don't have endless time to learn from our mistakes. What I feel most certain about is that whatever happens next, it's no longer up to them. It's up to us. And as never before, the power is in your hands. And first and foremost, it means we all need to participate in our lives and in our world. And one really basic example of this new operating model that I've been talking about here, it's an organizing infrastructure that, again, requires mass participation to work and is all about serving the common good. And it's one that actually has been in place for many years, and that's voting. Yeah, boring, simple voting. And the United States, for some time now, has lagged way behind the majority of other developed democratic countries in the percentage of people who turn out to vote. And when we don't vote, elections are bought by the highest bidder. Let me say that again. When we don't vote, elections are bought by the highest bidder. And then things deteriorate in a way that we become cynical and even less likely to vote. So is it any wonder that eventually, that downward spiral resulted in Donald Trump? As a new order emerges, where massive numbers of people join together for the good of all, an old order of hierarchies that essentially put the power over masses into the hands of a very few. These are more virulent than ever and are threatening the world more than ever. Now, my hopeful perspective on this is that this is the crisis that's pushing us to evolve. And that said, we just don't have a lot of time. Did you know that the US is the only developed country with a major political party officially denying the reality of climate change and doing everything possible to slow or halt environmental protection actions? In fact, the three worst countries with regard to climate change denial are the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. Now, these three countries share a common thread, and that's Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch, one incredibly powerful person who's controlled major media outlets in all three countries, including the climate change denying Fox News. Three major media outlets that have profoundly shaped a lot of people's thinking. Just think about that. One person having that much power to shape the thinking and the politics of these three very important countries. That's the epitome of old-style hierarchical power that's putting our very survival at risk. Trump as president didn't happen overnight. Over a period of years, there's been a steady erosion of the regulations that maintain democracy and well-being. Once upon a time, there was a firewall between news and entertainment, for example. It's just one tiny little example. And that firewall disappeared so that news could become more profitable. By 2016, that led to Donald Trump receiving unlimited free airtime over other candidates simply because he was the more interesting performer. In fact, the CEO of CBS said at a conference in 2016, and I'm quoting him here, "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. The money's rolling in and this is fun. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say, but bring it on, Donald," end quote. That's another example of very few powerful people shaping the destiny of many. A lot of what's going on in our political world now happened very simply because too many of us have tuned out. We've reached a collective crisis point where if we're to see humankind move forward into renewal, which I think could be tremendous. I think it could truly be a quantum leap of renewal. as opposed to going the other way into extinction. We all need to participate because truly together anything is possible. That's where we're finding a new form of power. And there are a wave of movements that have sprung up in the last couple of years, and they are changing the power dynamics of our culture. And the amazing thing about the times we're in is that we don't have to make huge personal sacrifices to change the world. We just have to participate and encourage those around us to participate. And now, there's a lot more to being a spiritual activist that I'm talking about tonight. There's a lot that has to do with using the power of our consciousness and the power of our being as a force for change, as well as the get out there and vote style of activism that I'm talking about a little bit more here. But seeing as how we're so near Election Day, and this is probably the most consequential election in our country's history. Now, I mean that. I'm not trying to be a drama queen here. I don't usually talk this way. But if you look carefully at where we are now and what laws and checks and balances have already gone away and are increasingly on the edge of going away, and the ripple of impact the United States has on the rest of the world, this may well be the make or break moment for not just democracy as we know it, but life on the planet as we know it. Your vote, and you're getting your friends and neighbors out to vote, may well be the most consequential thing you ever do for our world. So please use the incredible power you have to change the world on November 6th. Go out and vote. And do join me again. I'll be doing more of these talks on spiritual activism. And I will be focusing more on the spiritual aspects of how to use our consciousness to create a better life for ourselves as well as a better world for all of us. And for more on this, please do check out my book. It's called The Breakthrough Point, A Spiritual Activist Guide to Thriving in a Modern World. You can find it on Amazon. My name is Lynn Woodland. And if you got value from this talk, please do share it. Share it with your friends. Pass it on. And until next time, everyone, namaste. Thank you for joining me.
Nice.
Okay.
There was not great